Hello everyone, and welcome to another 8.5 by 11 scrapbook layout process. Today I am focusing on November of 2023. I'm still trying to catch up on my album from last year. And from the photos that I took in November, there were two special days. One was spent down at the beach, actually 3 different beaches. We went out for the day, and one just at our local park where we now have a makers market, which is really, really cool to go down to. And this was the first makers market they've had, and they've since continued on with that, which is fabulous. And I got to try one of these potatoes on a stick here, which was a bit of a treat. And I've printed off my photos and I have laid them out. Now I was going to follow a sketch in the Creative Design Team's 8.5 by 11 sketchbook, and it's the first one here. And you can see here I've set up my right page with my photos, and instead of having the 3 photos, I've combined this section into one photo and put that at the top, and then put this photo down the bottom here, and then I'll have my journaling spot. And for the left side, I've sort of gone off on a tangent from the sketch, but I have cut this B1 to the size of the measurements. All of our cutting guides have measurements below them to make it really easy for you. And then I was going through all of my paper selections to do these areas here, and I have done this sketch before and I really love it. And then I was looking at this sketch and I thought having these 3 torn pieces at the bottom would work, and I did pick out some paper from Country Woods and 2 other papers that are just leftover pieces. So I was going to do this as a theme, like a scrap your leftover pieces, but when I was trying to put this and make it all work, it was all getting a little bit too busy. So as I was going through all of my old papers, these are close to my heart, this one's Stampin' Up, I found some wood grain paper from Close to My Heart from back in 2020. That has been sitting, I sort everything by colour, and this is almost too precious to use. So I've been hanging on to it for ages. And then I thought, why not try and bring this in and use some of my precious paper? I don't know if I want to do whole entire sheets of this in the background, but I think it's time to get this paper out and use it. It works quite well with these photos here, and I'm thinking it's going to work quite well with these ones as well. But it's just a little bit too much pattern, and I was going to use both sheets. I'm going to end up with another one in my precious pile because I think I'm only going to use half a sheet for each page. So I'm going to adhere these photos down to the mats that I've prepared. This one here is all contained in a grid style fashion as per the sketch I showed you. This one, they're all coming off the edges in a certain area, but it will still work as a mat because they're all partially on top of this. So I'm thinking, and this is how I'm going to work it, I'm going to adhere these down. I think I've got about 3 sheets of this paper, so I know that I can bring that in and possibly use this for another page. But I really love this side. This was the one that to me was very precious and I had trouble cutting up. So today's the day I'm going to cut into this piece of paper. I've got my photos adhered to the mat, and I haven't brought my pattern paper in yet. I've cut this down to 11 in height, and I'm going to tear this piece, not quite in half because this has a white core, so I want the same effect on both sides. So I'm going to use my water brush to do some controlled tearing. And when you're doing paper tearing, it all depends on what side you have facing you as to which way the paper will show the rough edge. So I'm going to have this facing towards me, and I'm going along at roughly around the 5.5 inch mark, and then I'm going to tear towards me, and then I'll turn my piece of paper around. I've gone off where my water is. Sometimes the water doesn't flow quite as freely, so I'm just going to put a little bit more water in there and let that soak into the paper. So I like how that looks, and then I'm just going to bring this in and have a little look to see if that is too much of the wood grain or if I want to reduce that down at all. I don't want it coming down here because that's a little bit awkward with where this photo comes out at the top. And I am going to do some stamping on here and bring in some other elements. I'm just going to have a look at this size on the left page. I'm liking the width of this on the right page, but maybe I don't need quite that much of it on the left side. Just going to bring this one in. I know the tear is going the wrong way, but maybe all I need for this one is about this much. But then that creates another little awkward angle. So what I'm going to do is do this at the 5.5 inch mark again. I can always tear it down just a little bit more. And I've got the water stains here, but that will dry out. I want to do some stamping direct on the page, so I'm just lining everything up first. So I quite love how that looks. This is going to be a very clean and simple and hopefully quick page. I do want to do some stamping on this, as I said before, so I'm going to bring in Seaside Wishes. This is a very cool set. You can order this as a bundle, so you get the embossing folder, the dies, and the stamp set. You can order things separately, but it works out cheaper to buy the whole bundle. And what you can do with these, with the 3D embossing, you may have seen other demonstrators do this already, but you can put your die into here, put a piece of paper, close this up, and it will cut and emboss all in one go, and you'll get these gorgeous sand dollars that have cut out from here. So I'm thinking I might bring some of those in. So I'm just going to put these off to the side here. And in the stamp set, you also get 2 sizes of the starfish. I've adhered my stamps direct to the case here. They come sandwiched between 2 pieces of plastic. And when I put a magnet on this side, I usually put one of the pieces of plastic over there just to protect the edge of the stamp so that no damage will come to it from the dies. But you can see how finely cut these pieces are. I think they're absolutely gorgeous. They might work on this page because I've got this potato spiral here, but I'm thinking they will also work really well. I'm going to die cut some more of those. I'm not sure if I'm going to bring in the sand dollars on this side, but I do quite like how they look. And that's one of the starfish. And then I might bring in another one of these as well. So I'm just going to have a little play with this while I've got these out because I was showing them to you. But I do want to do some stamping. There is this very cool little bubble texture stamp. It's quite small, but I'm going to do that around the edges of some of these. I think I'm going to do some of that stamping off in the areas where my clusters are going to go, and I want to do that before I adhere everything down. I've got my photos adhered to the mats here and these pattern papers down, and you can see I've gone to town cutting a few of these from the Seaside Wishes. I absolutely love the detail that you get from this. But before I start putting these onto the page, I want to do a little bit of stamping, and rather than trying to mask things off, I'm just going to mark out where the edges of my paper are so that I've got this as a little bit of a guideline. So this is where the edge of my paper comes down and around here as well. So what I'm going to do is just move these off to the side. I'm going to use crumb cake, and I think I'm going to do second generation because I want it to be fairly subtle. So I'm just going to stamp this onto a piece of white here, and I think second generation is the way to go for this. So what I'm going to try and do is create these bubbles so that it sort of outlines where the edges of those large photo mats are. I'm rotating my stamp. Some of them are going to be a little bit darker than others, and that's fine. It all depends on how hard I press with my stamp. I don't want it to be totally even all the way around. But I'm thinking this is going to look pretty good. I'll just bring that in again. And you can see that's creating an additional frame for these photos and reducing the amount of white space that I've got here. Most of you know I'm a big fan of white space, but sometimes it's fun to add these little details in. And when you're looking at a stamp set, sometimes these sort of things go unnoticed. You're looking at the big images like the starfish and the sand dollars and not really seeing these other little things, and they're really quite gorgeous to add to your pages. It just adds a certain amount of fun and whimsy to this. I quite love how that looks. Because what I'm thinking of doing is tucking these under. And I don't want to make it too busy. I know these pieces here are more suited to beach type photos, but it sort of works with this swirly potato here. So what I'm going to do now is just stamp a couple of these so that there's a little bit of interest coming out from this area. Quite love how that looks. I'm also going to do a few down in this area. So I'm going to introduce some of these splatters down here. I'm going to continue on and do this page as well. I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the right side here as well. I've put all those coral little elements down around, just using them as like little embellishments tucked half under my photo mats here. And I need to put my month on here, and I've realized November isn't going to fit across here. So I think I'm going to have to start from this end down here. I'm just going to space these out just to make sure. It's a rather large title, but this is the alphabet that I have been using all the way through. It's a close to my heart one called Havana, and I really love it, and I want to keep it consistent all the way through. And this is going to be a little spot where I'm going to bring a tag in here with a sentiment stamped on it. And this tag has little pierced holes, which you can see coming through from the espresso behind it. There are so many tags on this set. It's actually Greetings of the Seasons dies, and you can get it in a bundle with a stamp set, but it's very Christmas themed. But I really wanted this because I'm already thinking about my Christmas tag Tuesday that I do in November, December. This die set's going to come in handy, especially doing layered tags, I think, because there's so many of them. So that is going to fit across here. So I'm going to stamp this in Memento ink, and I'm going to do it directly onto the page. So there is going to be some crossover here with the letters, and sometimes that can be a bit of concern. So what I'm going to do is try and scooch my letters over a little bit, and I might start with the E. I like stamping them one at a time. I don't mind if they're not all level, but I think that by starting this here, it's going to work better than starting with the N and having one of these letters try and bridge this paper tag. So move these off to the side and stamp my E first. I always like to do a little bit of a test stamp just to make sure, even though these have been used many times. And I can leave my E on the block because I've got another one to put in. What I do love about Stampin' Up! Die sets, and I do have one of their stamp alphabets, is you get more than one of some of the letters. So some vowels and consonants that are used a lot will have two of the sets, so you don't need to keep swapping them out. So it makes for a lot quicker stamping. So I think that's going to work quite well. So I'm going to continue on and stamp the rest of my title. And I'm also going to stamp onto this little tag that I had while I've got the stamping things out. I'm just going to close this up. So I'm going to use a sentiment from this Seaside Wishes that says, sometimes the simplest things mean the most. This little outing that I did, I had to deliver some product to somebody that lives down this way. And my daughter came for the drive with me, and then we had lunch out and explored several of the beaches in the area. And it was such a beautiful day out in the sunshine. It wasn't overly warm, but when we were out of the wind, it was absolutely beautiful. I think what I'm going to do is do a couple of tags here, because this to me is just sitting there like this. So I'm going to cut another one of these tags to do some more journaling on. I'm just going to get out early espresso. And I haven't used this one before. I used to do this all the time with Close to My Heart stamp sets. So it's a habit of mine now. I like to season it up a little bit. But I don't know that you need to do it as much with the Stampin' Up! Ones. And usually, whenever I stamp with these, the first stamp comes out beautifully. And then I'll see if I like the look of it on the page. You can see how beautifully that has stamped. You don't need to press in too heavily on these ink pads. I think that is going to work quite well. And then I'm going to put another little tag in there. And I might distress the edges of this a little bit as well. So I'm just going to go around the edges of this. Even though I haven't done it on any of my other elements on the page, I probably could have. But I just think the tag looks a little bit stark like this. And when I was doing my stamping off camera for the left page, I actually did some of those splashes onto the journal box here. So now that I've inked up that white piece, I'm going to go around the edges of this one as well while I've got it out. So I'm going to continue on with my stamping here, and I've got some other little finishing touches that I need to do for this layout. So I've die cut another one of these tags, and I've adhered them together just on this edge. So I'm going to put them over here like this. And just in case you haven't seen this trick that I do with twine, sometimes I find it hard to get things through the hole. So I get out my crochet hook, hook it around. I've doubled this over, so I'll have 4 strands of this in the end. And then I can just pull this back through. If you crochet, you know how easy it is to do something like this. If you don't crochet, just doing what I just did then, I'll do it again for you so that you can see, and I'll do it a little bit slower. So I'll just unpull this. So I've got 1 strand of twine, and then I just put it in half. And quite generous. So this is probably around 12 inches, this piece. It's so that I've got enough to hang on to and work with. I put my crochet hook through, and then I hook onto these pieces. Pull it through and pull up, and then I've got my little loop here, and then I can grab those pieces that are remaining at the back, pull that through and pull it up, and I've got a perfect little tied piece for the top of my tag. And then when I've done my journaling, I can adhere that down. So I'll do my journaling just on this little bit here. I'll do some here and then off to the side. And then I'm going to bring in these adhesive back swirl dots. I've just gone and grabbed the paper pack to show you. They're just called adhesive back swirl dots, and they come from the A Little Latte collection, but you can purchase them on their own. And I think they're perfect for beach photos because they do have a little bit of a swirl in them like this. And I'm thinking what I'm going to do, I don't know if I'm going to use these. Oh, one just flew off onto my jumper. You go back on there. I'm thinking that I might use the brown ones. I might use some of the peach ones. They actually look quite nice. I might use all three of these. And then I'm just going to adhere these around. And I'm doing my usual where I just do a formation of 3. Actually, I'm going to just take this one off if I can, because I think that one will look better. It's almost a perfect match for this wood grain paper that's behind here. It looks so cool with that together. It's like they were meant to be. So I've held on to this precious piece of paper for just the right moment for Stampin' Up! To bring out these little dots so that I can use them on my page. It's funny how sometimes things work like that. What I love about this is that you can mix and match so many different elements to get the look that you want for your layouts. So when I'm sticking down that light brown one with the swirl on it, I'm making sure that it's on a darker element, and that way that will stand out. So I'm going to put a lighter one up here, and then a peachy coloured one down in this corner here. In hindsight, I probably could have stamped this in the early espresso. I'm so used to stamping my month titles in black. I'm just going to bring this up so that you can have a look. Hopefully the camera is focusing on this. You can have a look at the subtle little bit of stamping that I've done around all of these edges here to add a little bit more texture to the page, and also to give a place for these die cut pieces. They're so delicate and so fine, but they cut so beautifully. I'll just put these down. I'll bring this other one back up so you can have a look. And just adding a little bit of that stamping, the second generation stamping, onto the journal mat brings the design of putting this sort of effect onto the layout and makes everything look like it's supposed to belong. I've got that stamping here again around these coral pieces. And even though these are seaside pieces, I think it still really works well with these potato swirls. So there's my November pages pretty much done. I'm just going to trim this down a little bit, and then what I'm going to do is make a couple of them in different lengths so they don't look all exactly the same. I quite like it when things are a little bit uneven. And I'm going to stop there. A fairly simple page, but with subtle little stamping, and there's gorgeous elements here. And it started off with that sketch just with this pattern design here, and then it morphed into something else. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, happy crafting, and bye for now.